Welcome to the Boomer Briefing podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Gary Boomer, visionary and strategist at BoomerConsulting. And with me today is Jim Boomer, our CEO, and someone who has been heavily involved in succession planning and implementation. Hi, Jim. Thank you for being on this podcast this morning.
Hi, Gary. Great to be here. Looking forward to having a discussion around succession.
Well, this is a topic that many people fail to address or procrastinate about. One of the statements I'd often make is that succession isn't just about retirement. And in sports, they call that next man up. And in business, it's a key growth strategy. Great leaders identify and develop future leaders and their successors. Any comments on that?
Well, I mean, simply I agree 100%. Leaders have to be identifying and developing their successors from a very early stage. I think too often we just think about the very top of an organization. And so, in fact, I would add that aspiring leaders need to be included as well. If you are leading a team as a manager or something, and even if you aren't in a top level leadership role now, but you have aspirations to do so in the future, you need to be developing the people that you manage and identifying potential candidates who are going to fill your role when that next opportunity comes along.
Well, let's talk about some of the components of a strategic plan. And what do you think the most important components are?
Yeah, there's a lot involved. So here's kind of what I see as the key things that need to be thought through, need to be included in a succession plan. It's all got to start with the personal, emotional, aspirational side of the individual who is either retiring or moving into another position or wants to. And that person has to get very clear on what it looks like, what you aspire to be doing, but just as importantly, what you aspire not to be doing. And so this piece of it has to be started well in advance because it requires a lot of thought, and over time you'll likely go through multiple iterations. So starting with the personal emotional, paint the picture of what you want, but then as you get into, okay, how am I going to prepare successful successors? You need to lay out your roles and responsibilities. So from an internal perspective, this includes key relationships. What are you doing from an internal leadership responsibility? What are your key skills and knowledge? Then lay out your client responsibilities. Really, I would start with your top 10 and identify for both the internal and external who's a likely successor. But then you got to assess what's their readiness today. And if they're not ready, how do we need to develop and train them to get them there? And then I'd say a special note for equity owners, you need to be very familiar with the partnership agreements and the buy-sell agreements. And I'd make a note, if you don't have those in place, I would add that to the top of your list because, that should proactively look through a lot of the gotchas and issues and debates that may come up from selling your equity and transferring your equity. And it also, this piece of it creates opportunities for those future leaders in the pipeline to be owners and to, elevate if that is their aspiration.
Well, you mentioned a lot of items and issues there. What's the first step to getting started?
Well, I think it goes back to my last answer. You got to start with being very clear on what you want for the future and what you don't want. But I think you also have to work with your team and your pipeline of potential successors and get very clear on what they want and what their future looks like. Because, you can go down a path and think that somebody is your best successor, and it may not be what they want. And so if that's the case and it's not a match, then you need to be looking elsewhere. So I would say the first step is get very clear on what you want, and talk to your team and make sure you're very clear on what they want for the future as well.
Well, from my experience, I think you're right on target. And I will say that when I went through this several years ago, I went to the outside and contacted several advisors. Who do you think should be on that advisory team? Because one of the tendencies I've seen with small business owners, and particularly with CPAs and attorneys, is they try to do too much do it yourself rather than involve the outsiders. So you might comment on who those advisors should be and why that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely need to have the legal and the financial representation, and especially if that is the businesses and not necessarily your personal, it can make for a smoother transition. And if you've been proactive and created those partnership agreements and laid these things out from a financial side, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. But I would say from an emotional side, your advisory team needs to be your personal support system. So whether that's your spouse, a close friend, whatever that structure is, they can really help you work through the personal, emotional side of it to paint the picture of what you want. I think it also sets you up for success because, let's say your spouse has a completely different view on what your retirement looks like than you do. That can cause some unanticipated friction on the other side of it. So having that conversation earlier will make that side of it smoother too. And then I'd say, your team is an important piece of it because we all have things that people depend on us or go to us for that we probably aren't even thinking about or may not be aware of. And so we certainly need to work through the first pass at it, and probably the second and third. But at some point, you need to engage the rest of the team to offer their perspective and feedback. And if you're an equity partner, your fellow shareholders need to be a key piece of this as well. And once you're confident in the plan you've developed, I would say go back to the whole team. Like the team needs to know what's going on, and that clarity and transparency is helpful for everyone. Aspiring leaders may not be pushing for an opportunity because they don't see it opening up anytime soon. And this may, by communicating it, you may save a really valuable team member who you may not even know it, but they're looking for other opportunities.
Well, we have limited time here, so I'm going to keep us moving a little bit, but valuation is always an important part, and it seems very important to the CPA community, and probably even more so today. And there are other opportunities and options out there. You might talk about valuation and depending upon, or the decision a seller has to make, whether they want to maximize that value or whether they want to transfer that ownership to certain individuals.
Yeah. It's not an easy one. I think I'll go back to the agreements, and if you can, when you develop those agreements, if, as an ownership group, you can come to a valuation formula that you agree upon before it becomes personal and somebody's going through it, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. There are other elements that come into the decision then of, speaking of that, creating opportunity for the pipeline, what does that look like? Do you discount that valuation for internal sales versus, say, an outsider buying your company? And that would be when you're looking to build something beyond just your maximizing your own personal wealth, and really looking at how do we make this a sustainable business. And I know in a lot of organizations that is dependent that their payout is dependent on that sustainability and that success of the organization ongoing. So you are personally incentivized to make sure that you're setting the company up for success as well, because if there's no money to pay you out, then you're what you've worked for so long can be devalued or even worthless. So you have to weigh getting the most money with what is best for, finding the balance of what's best for the business, what's best for me, and what's best for the people who have worked very hard alongside you, who are looking for an opportunity for ownership as well.
Do you have any ideas or tips for our audience on how they can increase value as they move into this stage and have owners retiring?
Well, I think that there's a lot of aspects of what you can do to create more value in your business. I think the more you can look for opportunities to create services and value for your clients that are developed and delivered on a team approach rather than an individual or a key person. So, we're in consulting, and when you are your value in the market is dependent on a key individual, your value is a lot less than if you have a team that can deliver that process and that service. And they could, if someone was buying in, they're confident that they could develop someone quickly and fill them into that gap. And so I think your dependency on key employees is a huge determinant. Things like developing recurring revenue streams have a big impact as well. The types of services that you're providing and the types of clients that you're serving and how deep you go with them are all going to have an impact on how your business is valued, and continuing to grow the business. We can't just stagnate or the value actually erodes. So, there's a lot that goes into evaluation and that goes into increasing the value of your business. But those are a few things.
Well, I think those are very much on target. And we're seeing today in the marketplace that tax practices are viewed less valuable than they probably were 5 years ago. And part of that is due to the retention rate of employees and just the overall access to both resources and technology. You might speak to technology a little bit and how some firms have tried to either skimp and then reduce the value, or they are heavily invested in technology and they have more leverage and revenue per full-time equivalent.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to say, okay, we're going to, tighten the purse strings and not spend if we know we're selling, and then really limit your investment in technology in all areas of business. But you're basically starving the business of its basic oxygen. And when you do that, you're diminishing value, not building it. And so when you invest in technology and process and your talent, you have created a more valuable organization, a more sustainable organization, and a thriving organization. while you may think they're just going to rip and replace all your technology, the reality is if you are a leader and have been investing, you're likely going to there's elements of what you're doing that are going to benefit the acquiring firm or individuals into the future. So, if we're trying to maximize value, we can't just take a cost cutting approach. We have to take a value creation approach.
Very true. As we close this out, any ideas or advice on where our audience can go for further guidance and help in this area?
Yeah, well, you opened by saying this is really this is top of mind for a lot of firms and people in the profession, because we're going through a major shift. A lot of baby boomers that held off retirement are now on their way out. Some of the Xers are thinking about retirement, and so you definitely need, there's a lot of people going through it. So I think don't try to figure it all out within your own four walls. The more you can tap into the experience and knowledge and expertise of your peers of things that have worked and haven't worked, that's going to accelerate your progress. I'd also say, on our website, we have a guide to succession planning. Is it I just copy it and paste it and it's the silver bullet? No, but it goes through a lot of things, and it will make you think, and probably think about some things that you haven't yet, to help you on this journey. So that's on our website and under Insights, and you can download that guide and have a look at it.
It is a bit dated, but many of the questions are still relevant. Some of the examples may not be as relevant as when we initially did this and put it together, not only for our own internal purposes, but for use by several of our clients. So any other thoughts that you'd like to leave with our audience today?
I'll leave you with where I kind of started, start early. It's never too soon to be thinking about succession. And it's never too soon for that to benefit the organization. So again, even if you're not in the quote leadership role, by thinking succession and, creating redundancy in your role, you are creating value in the organization, and you are creating value for your team because you're developing them and challenging them and giving them opportunity to play at a higher level than, maybe their roles and responsibilities outlined. So don't wait till you've identified, I'm going to retire in a year, and then start thinking about these things. And then I mentioned agreements and laying it out. Do that proactively. It'll make life a lot easier on the tail end when either you or one of your fellow partners or just a team member is going through this process. If you've thought through proactively, it's going to lay it out, and it makes it a lot easier that you don't have to make these tough emotional decisions while you're going through it.
Well, thanks, Jim, for your insight and time today. What's the best way for anyone in our audience to contact you if they have further questions?
Well, certainly you can reach out to me on my social channels, and most of them are all just Jim Boomer, as well as you can reach out to our team at any time, and anyone from our team would be happy to talk to you, and we'll get you to the right place in our team to get you what you need and get you the answers that you need.
Well, thanks, Jim. And in closing, thanks to our audience for tuning in, and we encourage you to watch for regular podcasts on timely and relevant topics in the future that impact our profession. So Until next time, good day.